I'm Camille Carroll. I'm a neurologist in Plymouth. I am an academic neurologist, and as you've heard, I'm the chief investigator of the PDStat, the simvastatin trial. I'm also involved in the linked clinical trial committee, but I'm not going to talk any more about that. The real reason I'm here today is because I'm the national lead for neurodegeneration within the Clinical Research Network. But I also have, as you would expect, some local regional roles within the leadership team within our own clinical research network in the South West Peninsula. And the other thing that I do in the University of Plymouth, which I'm not going to talk more about, is I'm the Integrated Academic Trainee Lead. This is, again, an NIHR funding infrastructure to support academic growth for new PIs, both medic and non-medic, although we're not allowed to say non-medic, are we? Because you can't be a non-person. So for NMAPs, nursing, midwifery and allied health professionals. There is a lot of funding available, as you'll be aware, to fund training processes right through from pre-doctoral level through to doctoral fellowships, post-doctoral fellowships, and then more senior academic careers. And that's really to build up the CI base, the Chief Investigator base, for academic growth within the country as part of the life sciences industry strategy, which is hugely important for the UK and the UK economy. I'm not going to talk more about that because being a CI, as Oliver has eloquently described, being a CI and developing one's own study, taking a research idea and getting it through to fruition isn't really what the research network is about. There's overlaps, but the research network is about research delivery and encouraging people to be local PIs to facilitate delivering probably other people's research, including commercial research, not necessarily one's own research. So what I'm going to talk about is how the Clinical Research Network is organised, how it's structured, the Study Support Service, which is a large part of the service that the Clinical Research Network offers, and how the Clinical Research Network is putting mechanisms in place to support growth amongst the delivery teams and also portfolio growth. So I'm just going to get some mitigation in. I pinched these slides from a slide set that was provided by the CRN for dissemination, and they are full of really small text, some of which I've adjusted and some of which I haven't. So this is one that I haven't, but you can, I'm sure, appreciate what all these words might say based on the colour. So the CRN only covers England, it doesn't cover the devolved nations. NIHR is part of NHS or linked with NHS England. It doesn't exist in that form in Wales, Scotland or Northern Ireland. There are similar bodies and they have strategic collaborations and allegiances, but the infrastructure is not the same. So it only covers England. There are 15 regional networks, and you will no doubt know which is yours. This is ours. It's South West Peninsula, and it covers Devon, Cornwall and Somerset. And then within each network, there is a host organisation, which is an NHS trust. So within our region, the host organisation is the Royal Devon and Exeter Hospital. There is then infrastructure that exists at regional and national level to support the function of the network in all that it's supposed to do. Within each region, there will be a clinical lead for neurodegeneration. On the whole, there are 1 or 2 regions who haven't quite appreciated that when Dendron ceased to exist 2-3 years ago, they needed to have clinical leads in place for dementia, neurodegeneration and neurology as 3 separate leads. And therefore, in some regions, there is not that clinical leadership within the neurodegeneration portfolio. And neurodegeneration, as per CRN, means Parkinson's disease, motor neuron disease and Huntington's disease. So this person, that clinical lead, will have oversight of those 3 disease area portfolios. And actually the recruitment number, bums on seats in terms of patients, is higher for motor neuron disease than it is for Parkinson's disease. The motor neuron disease portfolio is busier, and we just need to be alert to that. Primarily because at national level, most people that are on the national specialty group are Parkinson's disease researchers, because it grew out of the old portfolio management group within Dendron for Parkinson's disease. So there's a bit of a mismatch in the clinical leadership structure nationally. But anyway, within each region, as well as having this one person that has oversight of the 3 bits of the portfolio, there should be then sub-leads for each disease. So ideally there'd be a Huntington's disease sublead, a motor neuron disease sublead and a Parkinson's disease sublead, and those are the people that should be coordinating research activity in those bits of the portfolio and supporting new PIs and helping staff, encouraging sites to take on studies to grow the research infrastructure. And they are ably supported by a research delivery manager. So the clinical leadership team provides strategic oversight and direction of travel and support, and it's the operational stuff should hopefully be supported by the RDM. They will cover obviously not just neurodegeneration, they're generally covering other bits of the portfolio, divided into divisions or clusters or whatever the local infrastructure is, but there will be support there. And it's important to find out who that person is, because they will be nationally networked as well as regionally networked. And then the oversight at national level is our National Specialty Group for Neurodegeneration, which is what I chair. And in that group are all the staff from the CRN who support delivery of the Parkinson's portfolio, as well as Huntington's and motor neuron disease. So that'll be the commercial person, the non-commercial person, the cluster leads, and also all of the 15 regional leads for neurodegeneration are invited to that meeting to provide local intel. What are the local challenges? What are the local barriers? What are the local success stories? What's going on amongst in the regions that we can share learning and improve our practice more across the country. And we also then have leads for research from each of the devolved nations with variable levels of engagement. Importantly, we have patient representation. We have, because this grew out of the portfolio management group for Parkinson's disease, and pretty much everyone at the table is a Parkinson's researcher, we have separate leads representing motor neuron disease and Huntington's disease. The motor neuron disease community, if any of you are aware, Oliver probably will be, is a very closely knit, successful clinical research community. They've maintained their clinical studies group from old Dendron days, and that they work very well as a national unit. And most regions have got representation at that motor neuron disease clinical studies group, but it almost feels like there are two processes developing in parallel, and the challenge is to ensure there isn't duplication and that we're working more efficiently. And then, of course, we also have trainee representatives. This is another part of the what NIHR provide when you're first starting to think about setting up a study. So I've just got a couple of slides on this. And this is the research design service, which I don't know how well it's publicised in various regions. They run a series of workshops, they have retreats, grant writing retreats, a whole load of support that's available for people wanting to develop their own studies. And what they do is they provide support to researchers developing grant applications. It used to be just NIHR grant applications that they were allowed to provide support for, but the remit is now broadened. So they will help people write grant applications for Wellcome Trust and other charities as well. What they do, the reason that they are funded, because it's free, as a service user it's free, you can go and ask them for their help. What they're there to increase the volume and quality of research that's happening in the UK. They will help you define your research question and then design the research. Methodology, all sorts of bits of your study cycle, they will have expertise that can help. They can help you with that. And they're allocated regionally. There seems to have been a bit of an infrastructure change. They have staff, physical people in different locations, and they will be distributed across the various patches. So it might be that if you want to have access to a health economist, for example, there isn't one locally. So for us, there might not be one in Devon and Cornwall, but because we're linked to the Bristol unit, they've got a chap in Bristol who might be able to provide input. So if you do have a study that you want to get off the ground, accessing the Research Design Service will give you access to all of these methodologies. They also have a small budget to help you with travel costs for PPI, attendance at study management meetings and those sorts of things. They can set up the meetings, they can book the meeting rooms, they can really just help you do all that stuff to get your study group off the ground and design your study. So I'm going to spend most of the talk talking about the study support service, because this is really what the CRN delivers, where a lot of the money goes. And it's got a nice infographic on the website. And it supports all these different elements, 6 stages of study growth and delivery. So these are the slides that I just copied. So I'm just going to pull out the main points. So the Study Support Service is there to support both commercial and non-commercial study delivery in England for studies that have been adopted onto the portfolio, and I'll talk a bit more about portfolio adoption and what that means. You might be aware that there's been a restructure. If you've tried to look for web pages on the NIHR website and gone to an old link, you'll see it doesn't work anymore because they've completely revamped their website. They've completely revamped the brand and this idea of the one CRN, one NIHR. They've pulled those three strands together: the the Training Coordinator Centre that used to provide funding for fellowships, now part of the NIHR Academy, the CRN. And other elements of the NIHR all pulled together into one group now. But the Study Support Service supports all these stages of delivering a study. So early contact and engagement with study sites, early feedback. So if you've got a study idea, primarily for pharma, of course, is the UK a viable country to base a study in, or will it not be deliverable in the UK? So they want some top-level feedback. The Study Support Service will do that. Then when they've decided that you want to open a study, you've decided, or pharma have decided they want to open a study in your region, how do you identify sites? The CRN will run site identification for researchers to help identify sites. What can be done to optimise delivery? A lot of effort put into that. What is the best way to get the studies delivered within the NHS? Effective study startup, which of course is a huge challenge, still is a huge challenge. It takes much longer to set up and start studies in England than it does in a lot of European countries. And if we don't sort this out, we will lose studies. We're already losing studies to countries that have got this much slicker. And then once the study is delivering, a lot of effort goes into performance monitoring, identifying studies that are not doing as expected, the RAG ratings. What mitigation can we put in place? Advising the CIs, do you need to open more sites? Do you need to extend your recruitment window? Do you need to get incentivisation packages out? You know, what are the processes that we can put in place to get that study delivered in the way that it needs to be? This is available on the website, and it breaks down all the stages of the study with what elements of the Study Support Service, those that I've just talked about, will help you with that bit of your study journey. Crucial to getting Study Support Service is, of course, your study needs to be on the portfolio in the first place. If it's not on the portfolio, the NIHR is blind to it. There is a lot of research that goes on that could be on the portfolio and isn't. So that is research activity that's not captured. And does that matter? Well, it sort of does, because we need to tell a story about our level of patient engagement, our engagement with clinicians who are delivering research, services that are delivering research. So if a site is really research active with nothing that is on the portfolio, that isn't visible nationally, and it means that there's no flag waving can go on, and as an example of good practice. So we try and get as much onto the portfolio as we can, just that there's visibility. Having said that, there are criteria for getting onto the portfolio, some of which prove a challenge. Both commercially and non-commercial studies are suitable potentially for portfolio adoption. And generally, when a study comes along, the adoption team decide, is it automatically eligible as a non-commercial study, which it would be if it's funded through a partner of funding organisation. Cure Parkinson's Trust is one, so it's Parkinson's UK, through a national level open peer-reviewed competition. If your study was funded by those means, it's automatically adoptable onto the portfolio, and then you get the Study Support Service supporting your study delivery. If it is non-commercial but through a potentially eligible funding stream, then you have to apply for portfolio adopting. So that could be an external funder, external to the UK, so Michael J. Fox, for example, or it could be that you're doing an investigator-initiated study with commercial funding, or it could fail on one of those other identifiers, in which case you have to apply for it to be potentially fundable, potentially adoptable. And then there are commercial contract research, which on the whole is automatically adoptable onto the portfolio. And then there are studies that are ineligible. So these might be the ones that are disappointingly ineligible is where it's regional or local funding. So it's still peer review, there's still open competition, but it's not national level open competition. For example, there's a charity in Bristol called Brace, which funds dementia research across the whole of the southwest, but it's not national funding. So if a study is funded by Brace, it wouldn't be suitable for portfolio adoption. So it's those sorts of things. But if it's a local researcher using their local research funds to fund a study, that obviously wouldn't in any way meet adoption criteria. In order to get onto the portfolio, it has to be research. That sounds self-evident, but sometimes, of course, it isn't self-evident. Where is that line between a service evaluation and research? That PKG thing that Parkinson's UK, that evaluation that Parkinson's UK supported a few years ago of PKG use across 14, 15 trusts was a service evaluation. And now that we're coming to submitting it for publication, the journals are coming back saying, where's the ethics? Because actually, with a different set of eyes, it looks like research, but actually it was service evaluation. So it can be difficult to disentangle, but it's got to be research, there's got to be a hypothesis, there's got to be new knowledge transferable, and there's got to be scientifically sound methodology. So it isn't any of this. It isn't audit, it isn't needs assessment or quality improvement project or anything like that. And it also, critically, is not just routine banking of biosamples or data or DNA, unless there's a clear hypothesis linked to it. So it's got to be research. It also has to have ethical approval, and this is the stumbling block. It has to be fully research costed. And a study being fully research costed, you would think would be self-evident, but actually isn't, it turns out. And there's quite a few studies on the portfolio that are not fully costed, and that is a challenge. It's a challenge for us within the network, within the leadership within the network, and you will know at site level, if you're trying to deliver a study and actually there's no money there for those nurse visits, you're running it at a loss. That's not sustainable. And there might be some studies that you think strategically, okay, we'll do this because it's collaboration that we want to forge, or we're hoping we'll get new studies in as a result, or there might be other pots of money that we can use to support that research nurse delivering that study. But that has to be quite open and transparent. And the situation at the moment is that there is a significant proportion of the portfolio that is probably not appropriately costed, and a lot of study teams are running at a loss, and that's putting a real pressure on study delivery. Posts aren't being refilled if people retire or resign. So that's the challenge that we're hearing across the country in a lot of study delivery teams. So this is absolutely critical. And the Accord guidance is very clear about what's a research cost and what is a service support cost. And part of the challenge is to make sure that the funding bodies, like Parkinson's UK, appreciate that this guidance is there. And when those trials are being evaluated by grant assessment panels, to make sure that these funding guidelines are being adhered to. And actually that is not the case a lot of times. Even in NIHR funded grants, it isn't the case. So there's lots of work to be done here just to keep our research delivery infrastructure sustainable. However, within each local region, there will be an Accord specialist that can take you through the steps for making sure that those studies are properly funded. So for the potentially eligible studies, what happens is I, as the national lead, get an email to say we've got this study, might be potentially eligible, can you please nominate 4 reviewers to look at it and see what they think. Those 4 reviewers are sent 2 questions to which they have to go yes, no. And if they get 2 yeses, they're on. If they don't, they're not. It's that level of decision making. And the questions are, is the study of clear value to the NHS, social care or public health? i.e., will the investment, including all the treatment costs, service support costs, patient time and effort of the care systems and the public, be hugely disproportionate to the value of the evidence that's going to be gained? So if everybody's putting a lot of effort into delivering something that isn't going to have huge impact or is very niche, then that would be a no. And does it take account of the appropriate realities and priorities of the NHS? That actually is quite a difficult question to answer, and the sub-question linked to that is it examining an intervention that is highly unlikely to be taken up even if it's proven to have some efficacy. So really expensive methodologies, only deliverable in specialist centre X, that will never be taken up in clinical practice. Why would the NHS be investing a lot of money helping to deliver that study? So that would be a no. But there are studies like this on the portfolio, and those are a challenge for us to deliver. So in terms of the costing, this is just to make you aware, there's a commercial costing template, which is downloadable from the internet, on the NIHR website, and it's quite a useful document, even if you're thinking about costing up a non-commercial study, because it has attributions of time and money for various tasks, such as rating scales or taking blood or whatever. So it's quite useful. There has been a bit of a revamp of this whole process. So the idea is that if a site is the lead site, so if for a commercial study, say, companies decided they want to open 4 sites in the UK, Plymouth might be the lead site for the study. Our trust would then fill out this commercial costing template. Hitherto, each trust would then agree it or not in the other sites, and then that sponsor would have to negotiate contracts separately with each of the 4 sites, which for some has been fine, and for others that has been such a turn-off they never want to do any research in the UK ever again. So we need to make that process slicker, and part of that process is to have one costing template, a single value contract for commercial studies across the whole of the UK. That contract will be defined by the lead site, and all the other sites will just sign up to it to smooth that contracting process. That is in hand, and will make a difference, hopefully. For the non-commercial attribution tool, there's a similar sort of process, and as Oliver has said, you start to run a non-commercial study and you soon find the myriad of forms that need filling in, including site specific activities and those sorts of forms. Again, the lead CRN does most of that. So for anyone running a multi-centre study, it's the lead site that fills out all of that documentation and passes it to all the other sites. So hopefully that takes some of the burden off the other sites. So just skipping through quickly the other services, as I've mentioned, early feedback. Some of you might be involved in early feedback if this is to decide whether the UK should be a country involved in study delivery. Does it meet the patient demographics? Does it meet clinical pathways? Can we find patients? Will the study delivery sit within the UK practice? Then after that, site identification, available for commercial and non-commercial studies, sending out EOI forms, and then the sponsor or the chief investigator can sift through them all and decide which sites you'd like to involve. RDMs can help with that as well, and the clinical specialty leads. And the idea is, as a clinical specialty lead within a region, to say, actually, this would be a perfect study to build up a new PI or a new trust to grow research delivery infrastructure. Optimising delivery. So identifying challenges ahead of time, getting those different recruitment methodologies planned out, recruitment plan written, working out what recruitment strategies work, what don't work, where are we going to invest our energies. The CRN have got tools and staff, hopefully in each site, to help deliver that. Effective study startup, we've talked about, so making sure that everything, including these clinical support services, critically medical imaging and radiology, these are the sorts of pinch points, pharmacies within region, that the CRN can support. And they also have clinical trial practitioners who can help deliver studies in units that might not have those staff available, primarily primary care. So if you want to set up a study that might be able to have follow-up visits in primary care, the clinical support teams within the community can help those GP practices deliver those follow-up studies. And we've also used our clinical support team to help new centres across our region where there might not be the rater expertise, for example, within those units. Performance monitoring, we go through this ad nauseam with the RAG rating, working out which studies aren't recruiting, why might they not be, is it a regional thing, is it a national thing, does there have to be a protocol rewrite, is it really not sitting in the NHS the way that we'd anticipated, has the landscape changed? PDCOM would be a good example of this, with a pilot that worked really well with an HTA funded programme, and then the phase 3 trial is just not delivering at all because the whole landscape has changed for speech and language therapy. The other thing that the CRN does is it looks at ways to support growth. It needs to be alert to the challenges coming in the future. And it does this through national specialty objective setting, horizon scanning, and these things called ETIs, Emerging Technology and Innovation Projects, which at national level, all the specialties are involved in delivering. And then it also has processes in place to meet challenges that the NIHR perceives as coming. So stratified medicine is a direction of travel. And the NIHR has mandated that each national specialty group has a stratified medicine champion on it, and Oliver is ours for neurodegeneration. So trials that are coming saying we want to stratify by genotype or phenotype, we need to make sure we've got infrastructure in place to do that. The NIHR digital strategy you'll hopefully all be aware of, because you'll have seen the Let's Get Digital logos on everything last year. There's a lot of effort being put into maximising use of digital technology for trial recruitment, delivery and performance review. And also portfolio development, which I'll just mention quickly. So there's a portfolio development group, which the CRN had said, no, nothing to do with us, we are delivery, we're not development. Now they are appreciating that you need to have something to deliver. So the portfolio development group now has a bit of NIHR blessing and is chaired by Monty Silverdale. And its remit is to identify research gaps and then work with people who might be interested in developing their own studies to bring those to fruition. We have national specialty objectives, which you will all be affected by. This is a driver for change. We talk a lot about what we want them to be for the next year. Huge focus on building up new PIs, early career researchers. So the national specialty objective for us, neurodegeneration, is to evidence increased early researcher involvement in our portfolio delivery and to provide the names of at least 2 new early career researchers, 2 new PIs. And each region, if you haven't seen this already, you will have to complete a template where they answer these questions. How have you undertaken to identify your early career researchers individually and as a cohort? What have you done to reach and support them individually and as a cohort? And how are you getting information out to those individuals to enable them to grow? So that could be training, such as an event like today, or mentorship, or, as I said, what processes have we got for identifying studies that might be good for a new site or a new PI? They also have horizon scanning. There's this thing, the NIHR Innovation Observatory, which you can suggest questions and they will look at the answers to those questions. So what is the use of digital outcome measures in clinical trials for Parkinson's disease? What challenges might that throw up? They will do a sort of state of the world type analysis for you. Our ETI, Emerging Technology and Innovation Project for this year for neurodegeneration, is Innovations in Clinical Trial Design and Delivery for Underrepresented Groups. And this has been a series of workshops and events to try and work out what infrastructure are we lacking to access underrepresented groups, which is socially underrepresented or demographically. There isn't much ethnic representation in clinical trials for Parkinson's disease, for example. How are we getting research delivered in care homes? What do we need to put in place? Are there other groups that we haven't thought about? And this is a sort of a infographic that's been created. And each year, each cluster nationally of specialties will have a project like this to try and drive forward the changes in trial delivery infrastructure that we need within England. So quickly, just giving you an overview, hopefully, of how the network's structured, how it's organised, what the Study Support Service offers, and what else is going on in the background that the CRN is doing to support research portfolio growth and delivery to make sure the UK is in a stronger place year on year for delivering trials. Thank you.